What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast, Thursday, October 9th. It feels like a Wednesday because the Bills just got started in Orchard Park with their week of preparation for Monday Night Football against the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to talk about a bunch of things on today's show, Ryan. The Staples Show on a Thursday, a little bit different, but a ton to get into. Keon Coleman, his first comment since the news broke on Monday that he was benched for the first series against the Patriots. I want to talk about, Maxwell Hairston, Tyler Bass, their 21-day practice window not being opened by the Bills again this week and how that maybe affects plans at the position. I also want to have a conversation around this wide receiver room, but really this passing offense in general. And then maybe we'll take some questions. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Yeah, these primetime games make every week feel a little bit weirder, especially on the Monday nights because pushes everything back. We'll be going to a practice on Saturday before heading to Atlanta. So I'll be happy when these primetime games are, in the rearview mirror for this season.
You'll be going to a practice on Saturday, Ryan. I mean, how many
Yeah.
times in a game week have you gone to a practice over the years? I'm trying to think of it.
Not a ton, because usually those practices are going on while I'm, teaching world history. So it doesn't usually work out to my advantage. So I'm excited about it, excited to see that final practice before that Monday Night Football game.
All right, so we caught up with Keon Coleman today, and I think that's the best place to start because I think this is it's an important conversation around what is, I think a lot of people forget, is still a very, very young player. And he was asked multiple questions about his benching, how he handled it, how he needs to respond from it. And I thought like the most newsworthy quote that came out of what he said, I tweeted the minute and a half worth of the interview out on X. He said, he was asked, how does he need to respond from this situation? And, if you haven't caught the news yet, he was suspended for the first series against the Patriots for disciplinary reasons, head coach decision. We don't exactly know specifically what happened, but this was his quote. And I think you could probably read between the lines a little bit. Just being where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to do, and showing that level of maturity. So very likely maybe late to a meeting or something along those lines. We don't have that for sure. When he was asked specifically about what it was, he said he wanted to keep that in-house. He was suspended for almost exactly the same thing last season against the Jacksonville Jaguars ahead of that game. This is still a young player that's learning what it means to be a professional. But I want to give him a bit of a pat on the back. I mean, a lot of times when these kinds of things pop up and players don't want to talk about certain things, they tend to kind of stiff arm the media a little bit. And a whole group of them walked over to Keon to ask him to talk about this today. And he was willing and he answered every question. He took accountability. And I think that, to Sean's point, over the course of the last couple of days when he's talked about it, I think that there's been a lot of that going on. And I think a lot of these young players, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. You got to give them the ability to make mistakes and fix things. And I think that's what Keon's really focused on doing.
This is a 22-year-old kid at the end of the day. He's made some mistakes. He was, benched for a series on against the New England, Jacksonville the year before that. So in terms of it happening in back-to-back years, if you're a Bills fan, you're a little bit concerned. I get that. But this is a very young player. A player that, like you said, it could be late for a meeting, whatever the case may be. We live in a whole different timeline now than when you and I were 22 years old. That's for sure. And it's tough. Players are being asked to act wise beyond their years in some cases. And Sean McDermott has a standard that he wants to be met, whether that's, being on time for things or whatever it may be. Like you said, we don't know the exact issue. I like the way that the team addressed it. I like the way that Keon responded to it a lot today because he showed a lot of maturity in his response. And you said it perfectly, answering the media, not no comment or anything like that. The Bills like to keep that stuff in-house, as Coleman said. Now it's up to him to respond. And we saw what he could do in week one when he was given a lot of targets against Baltimore. And with, Josh Allen saying that now they've really got to kind of get things going. I think that Coleman is going to get called on quite a bit.
He was asked about his own personal performance through the season. And, one of the things he said is like, when you have a run game like the Bills do, at times you're not going to be as involved, right? So it's about taking advantage of the opportunities that you get. Josh Palmer said a similar thing. I might even play that clip because I want to talk about the Bills' identity on offense in a few minutes. But if you look at if you go game by game for Keon Coleman, right, and he comes out with the 8 catches for 112 yards on 11 targets, he sees 11 targets in the opener, and over the next 3 games combined, he gets 11 targets. And I think it's got to be tough when you're asking for one of these wide receivers to step up into a wide receiver run role, like we talked about on BKL Makes Me Want to Shout a couple days ago. If you watched that episode, like, it doesn't feel like the Bills have a true number one receiver, because outside of that performance from Keon in week 1, there just hasn't been another performance like that outside of maybe Dalton Concaid last week as a tight end. And you're seeing it week to week. You're not getting the kind of volume that you probably need to make the kind of impact. I mean, it's a momentum based game in a lot of ways at skill position, running back, wide receiver, tight end, being out on the field, like getting opportunities when you're out there on the field. And, the identity crisis, if you will, I wouldn't go as far as calling it that, because the Bills offense has been so good through 5 weeks, but there's a little bit of that going on. We'll get to it in a minute, but on Keon specifically, do you feel like the Bills are doing him a disservice by not having him more consistently involved and leaning into what they've kind of become, which in a lot of ways, in a lot of games, is a run first team?
No, I don't think they have, because here's the thing, Matt. The week 1, 11 targets, that probably doesn't happen if they're chasing Baltimore for most of the night in terms of being behind in the scoreboard. They're not a pass-happy team, and had everything gone according to their game plan, they're not planning on throwing it that much in that matchup. So you look at Keon Coleman, there are still some warts in his game in terms of the separation and the routes run, what you can count on him for. That 50-50 ball. He pulled one down last week against New England. The first one, though, or one of the first 2 maybe, he did not win in those matchups. A back shoulder throw, he didn't seem ready for it. Didn't seem to be in the right position. So, it's just one of those things where you have to earn those targets. If you want to talk about someone that maybe should be getting more targets, probably Khalil Shakir, because of what he's shown over the last few years and the fact that he is proven in this offense and what he can do, and Joshua Palmer getting a large payday in free agency. So Keon Coleman being a 2nd-round pick, being a player that they invested in the draft, I like his game, but I don't know necessarily if the skill set matches someone that you want to get heavily involved. And then you throw in the run game with James Cook. And up until this game against New England, the run game had been working extremely well. You don't want to go away from that, because it makes opposing defenses have to play the run, respect the run. And that should, in theory, open things up for Josh Allen this passing game.
See, I'd push back a little bit on that, only because I can't remember the exact stat. I wish I had it up on my computer, but or I think might have heard it on a podcast, but the Patriots defense last week, when they played, I think it was base personnel. Again, I think I'm screwing up this exactly what it was. Whatever the scenario was, when teams passed on this defensive look, which I believe it was when they had 3 linebackers on the field, the success rate for offenses through the first 4 games was off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bills chose to run the majority of the times against that look. And I think from a Joe Brady perspective, you have to know those kinds of situational football, which is what Sean McDermott always talks about. And I think maybe that's baked into Sean's comments this week about the offense being too cute and maybe not leaning into some of the things that you can do well, whether it be Keon Coleman on the outside, Dalton Concaid, maybe getting him on the field more. I think if you go too far down the road into this is who we are an off running football team, and we are going to impose that identity on every single team that we play. Matchups be damned. How good that other defense is be damned. Like, you're going to run into a game like this where if you make mistakes, because this was a lesser team. Let's be honest, right? The Patriots aren't good as the Bills. They're a good team. They're getting better. They're definitely entering the chat, if you will, but they're not at the level that the Bills are at right now. But when you make those kinds of mistakes and you don't have the ability to maybe pivot fully, because the Bills pivoted. They started
Mhm.
getting their passing game going a little bit in the second half. They had some scoring drives, but in the end, it wasn't enough. So I think leaning too much on what you're good in and what you're comfortable in, that's not what the NFL is about. To me, what I think the NFL is about is finding a way to have different versions of what you do well, right? You have, who's the best player on this offense? Is it James
Josh
Cook?
Allen.
It's Josh Allen.
Yeah.
It's Josh Allen, who, as a passer over the last 5 years, has been as good as anybody in the NFL, right?
Mhm.
And when you are afraid to unleash that, or I shouldn't say afraid, but if you're holding that back because of who you want to be as an offense, we figured that out through 4 games. They can be a run heavy team. I just think you got to be careful going too far into that end of the pool.
No, I don't disagree with that, and I also don't want them to back down just because of an advantageous matchup. I do want you to try to establish the run, be a dual threat on offense. I hated the way they were running Cook, though, between the tackles at those 2 big defensive tackles that the Patriots have that are very good players. I think some creativity getting him out in space would have been a lot better for him around the edges. And maybe it's the different stat or different thing that you heard, but the Patriots were like 28th in EPA in terms of the passing. So I agree with you. The Bills really should have been targeting some of these guys down the field. You saw Concaid absolutely feast on that man defense. Maybe the problem was that the cornerbacks were doing a good job, the outside corners, that is, on some of these receivers, and the lack of separation. But yeah, I do think that the Bills probably could have come in with a different game plan, not gotten so cute with the tight end arounds and even the flea flicker. I know the flea flicker led to a positive play. Keep the ball in Josh Allen's hands in terms of the passing downs and let him throw it a little bit against a defense that was struggling against the pass. And I think there could have been a different outcome.
A lot to get into. I got a little bit more on this offensive identity conversation. We'll get to that a little bit later on the show. But before we get there, we have to let you know that we're brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, Ryan, it is the rush to the Tops Red Zone. And you can win the GOAT, the greatest of all tailgates, in the Tops Red Zone raffle. Shop from over 25 favorite brands and get unlimited savings when you purchase brands like Coca-Cola, Heinz, King's Hawaiian, Kraft, Pepsi, and so many more. You'll be entered to win the GOAT, an ultimate tailgate package that includes a Samsung outdoor TV, Traeger grill, Oni pizza oven, Igloo Cool Tunes cooler, a $500 chef experience, and so much more. To find out more, visit topsmarkets.com/redzone. All right, I want to get to the injury outlook, to start the week here. It's a lot to get into, but before we get to the people that are like not practicing or practicing a little bit, let's get to the players that are on injured reserve, because I feel like a lot of people have concern about mostly Maxwell Hairston, the rookie first round draft pick, considering the play that the Bills have gotten at both of their cornerback spots. And I'll be interested to, maybe catch up with Christian Benford tomorrow to talk about the start of his season and see what he has to say. I don't think it's been up to his standard, and I think he's probably not going to run away from those questions. We'll catch up with him tomorrow, most likely. But obviously, Tre'Davious White has been a sore spot in this defense. I think somebody that the fans are concerned about going into a matchup this week with Drake London on the other side, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, who's dealing with a hamstring injury as well, but Bijan Robinson in the passing game, run game, wherever he's at. Harrison's on injured reserve, and Sean McDermott said we'll see when it comes to when they'll open up his practice window. They're not doing it this week, and the big problem with that is now you've pushed this to next week, which is a 21-day practice window, right? He can be activated early in the first week of that, or all the way 3 weeks into the future. And next week is the bye. So we could be talking about opening up this practice window for the Carolina Panthers game. Now you're pushing up against the trade deadline. And with the Dorian Strong situation that it is, neck injury on injured reserve, the uncertainty around that, now you have a major problem on your hands if you're Brandon Beane. Do you trust Maxwell Hairston to get back in time and get up to a level to be able to contribute on the field? Or do you have to be ultra aggressive and go out and add a cornerback, Ryan? And over the last couple of days, corners, it seems like, have been flying around a little bit on the trade market.
Yeah. The Bills aren't going to be able to trade for a premier cornerback in theory, cap space and everything else. But I would love to see them address the position in terms of at least someone that a veteran presence that you can count on if this keeps going wayward with Trey White. If you don't know about Maxwell Hairston in terms of how long he's going to be out, I don't think that the Bills are hiding anything. But if you remember when the injury took place back in camp, when everyone was thinking the worst at first, but then the Bills said they avoided the worst case scenario. They listed him as week to week, and a lot of weeks have gone by since then, Matt. We still are getting the we'll see answer. You're seeing him do a little bit more in practice, but he's still wearing the bulky brace. You don't know what that's going to look like. So if I'm the Bills, I'm trying to find a fit, a depth piece. And maybe it's Rasul Douglas, and the Dolphins are going nowhere fast. Maybe you call them up and you offer something just to kind of bring him in there to compete with Trey White. He's just an example off the top of my head. He's not necessarily the greatest example of what you could find out there, but someone of that caliber. Because with Dorian Strong's neck injury, I can't count on him coming back at any point this season. In a perfect world, Hairston's back sometime after the bye, close to after the bye. And then as soon as he is, I am throwing him on the field as long as his everything checks out health-wise with the lower body injury. Because I know it might not be pretty at all times. There might be some mistakes being made, but by the end of the regular season, by the playoffs, you want this to be a trajectory of what we saw in Kansas City a few years ago with the rookie class and then getting their reps and going through growing pains in the regular season, but then really stepping up come playoff time. Because in the playoffs, I'm sorry, I can't trust Trey White. It's just not going to happen. I think you can kind of, I don't want to say hide him. I think he's passable against some of these teams on Buffalo's schedule. But if you get to the playoffs and you're playing against Kansas City, that's not going to bode well for the Bills and some of these other passing attacks. Heck, I'll even throw Jacksonville right now. I'm not saying I'm a believer in Jacksonville overall as a team, but you look at that wide receiver room of Brian Thomas Jr., disappointing start, and then Travis Hunter, for instance, and some of the other guys that they have there, that would worry me quite a bit.
So we had an insider text that I thought was a really good question and a good setup here from Daniel. And if you want to become an insider, you can interact with myself and Ryan 24/7 on the text line at 716-528-6727. It's kind of like a 24/7 mailbag if you want. If you send a question in there, usually myself or Ryan will respond and we have conversations on there. It's a great time. Daniel wrote, what do you think is going on with the Maxwell Hairston injury? I know McDermott has a history of not trusting rookies, but him saying we'll see when asked if Maxwell will play at all this year is extremely concerning, and questions need to be asked if there is some unalignment between McDermott or Bean. Right now, if we end up playing Kansas City and you have Tyquan Thornton, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy against someone like Trey and the Bills losing the playoffs, I think I'd have to join the chorus of those wanting to move on from McDermott because the schemes are too complex for younger players to be able to integrate into the defense, and the players that understand how to run it are not physically able to keep up with the more talented players. I'm talking DeMar Hamlin, Trey White, AJ Klein back in the day that knew McDermott's system, but their encyclopedic knowledge didn't end up mattering. I'm sorry, but it's one of the two things. If a first-round cornerback who isn't injured isn't getting game reps, either the coach isn't helping and or the GM has drafted two first-round players at a critical and premium position that are profoundly mentally deficient players such that McDermott is actually doing the correct thing by not playing them. There's more to this, but what's your reaction? Because I thought there's a lot in there.
Yeah, that was a great question. First of all, to be sending through the shout Insider Text line. I loved how detailed it was and how in-depth it was. I think right now with Hairston, they truly, I don't want to say they don't know when he's going to be back. I think there are boxes that need to be checked, and there are still some things that maybe he can't do. Maybe it's cutting. Maybe it's, pivoting.
Well, I will say today's video, I didn't get a video,
yes,
I was actually,
I saw it.
But there's a video online where he was actually backpedaling, going side to side, turning and running. That's the most I've seen physically him put strain on the leg since the injury. So he's definitely making progress.
Right. So that's maybe a check mark then. And there's probably just a few more boxes to check. And until that happens, the Bills probably aren't comfortable opening that window. They want to make sure that when it happens that he can get the reps needed to then get in. They need him out there sooner rather than later. I'm not at the point where I'm thinking that this is a Brandon Bean wasting a pick on a guy. We haven't seen anything yet from him in terms of on the field. This is not a Kaiir Elam situation or close to that yet. It is a premium position. I do agree with that part of the comment. And the Bills need him to step up because they viewed him, he was an outlier, Matt. We talked about this. We mentioned him during the draft process, but we never really went in depth on him because he didn't fit the prototypical Sean McDermott player in terms of the size, in terms of the tackling ability. He brought a speed element that necessarily wasn't something we were anticipating in that room, but he did do a lot of good things before that injury took place this summer. We saw growth. We saw him make some plays. We saw the breaking speed on some pass breakups this summer. So the talent is there. I just really think that the Bills haven't been able to check every box yet, and that's why the window has not officially opened.
So a few things here, like in terms of the disconnect between Bean and McDermott, this is something I was talking about back in the off season, right? Like I even posed a few questions to Bean and McDermott, and I don't ever know if maybe I had to be a little bit more direct on how I asked the question and asking if there has been a disconnect and if there is anything that the two sides are doing to get the coaching staff more aligned with the front office when you're making some of these selections, and it feels like there was, just from the outside looking in, on the Hairston pick, right? Because this was a guy that, if you compare him to Elam was a press man corner with a limited zone background. Like, to me, this was the complete polar opposite, as a guy in Hairston played predominantly zone defense. And I think it benefits from playing in a zone defense. He's not very big. So,
Right.
I know the Bills want their cornerbacks to be tackling, right? But I think that he's on the field to be more of a coverage player against a Xavier Worthy, against a Lad McConkey, whoever you want to try to match up against, put him on that side of the field because of the reactionary ability. We saw that in a couple of those practices, to your point, that I think is there. I do think over time, that to me is probably the most challenging part of the process, is getting your front office folks aligned with the plan for these players once they get inside the building and you almost hand them off to the coaching staff. It's complicated. And the other part of the question here, part 3 from Daniel, Landon Jackson and TJ Sanders don't look to be gems either. So it is possible they botched the first 3 rounds, but usually even busts are allowed to actually play in games. Peterman had to be in a game to throw the 5 interceptions, and he got named the starter the next year. Maxwell must be a 0 out of 10 player in that case to not even be put out there to take his lumps. Now, I do truly think, and that was the other part of it, and we just kind of covered it, I don't think Maxwell Hairston is being held back. I just don't think physically he's where he needs to be. But on TJ and on Landon Jackson, it's tough because you don't have Ogunjobi there right now when it comes to TJ Sanders. To me, he is not as pro ready as Deion Walker has proven to be, right? So Deion Walker is kind of elevated into a different role, which is fine. That, it's the same scenario that played out at cornerback, Christian Benford and Kyer Elam, their rookie season. But what I think TJ Sanders is really good at, they could still utilize that skill set. Once Ogunjobi gets back, he can be the main backup to Ed Oliver. And then when those two guys need a blow, TJ Sanders go rush the passer on third down, because that's his strength. He has been getting pressure at times this season. To me, he's not a great run defender. He was not considered to be a great run defender in college. He is here to be part of the team that pass rushes Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert in the playoffs. I'm not necessarily going to absolutely kill him for not being an elite run defender. He wasn't that in college.
No, and you hope in time and years on task he gets better in that area. But I agree. It brought him in here to be a pass rusher. I've seen flashes of it. I've seen him win immediately, get in the face of opposing quarterbacks. The quarterbacks have just been able to get the ball out quickly. But there have been some wins, and I get it. If it doesn't show up on the stat sheet sometimes as a sack, fans are saying, what is this guy doing? But he has had his fair share of wins this year as the pass rusher. You want to see him round out, become a more complete player, absolutely, but that comes with time.
All right, let's get into this injury report, a little bit more of it. Limited in practice to well, first of all, Matt Milano doesn't appear to be going on injured reserve. So he has the pectoral injury, did not practice today. So again, I think it's just about managing that injury here. Likely won't play for the next couple of weeks, but still in their plans. And listen, I think out of all the injuries, the Milano one is the one I think is the least big of an issue, because Shaq Thompson has been so good when he's been in the game. So if he has to play this weekend, I think the Bills are comfortable with that. Dorian Williams making progress with that knee injury. He was limited in practice, didn't practice all week last week. So that is taking a step forward. TJ Sanders didn't go today, so he could definitely be in jeopardy. But it feels like Ed Oliver is trending towards playing, right, Ryan?
Yes.
Did you see the Instagram post?
Yep, I
That
saw the
he put out?
Instagram about pretty much about
Go get my
where's my
belt.
rope or where's my
He's
belt,
like,
and
go
they're
get my
all
belt.
doing the lasso there. So yeah, I think he's definitely trending in the right direction. I even thought last week there was a sliver of a chance he was going to play. So give him another week here. I think he plays on Monday Night Football. He does seem to perform very well in these national audience games, having a lot of, I don't want to say rest because he was recovering from an injury, but coming in pretty fresh. I could see him being able to get after Michael Penix and have some success there. So I anticipate he plays. That helps if TJ Sanders can't go. Seeing Dorian Williams limited is trending in the right direction. And as you mentioned, Shaq Thompson has been way better than advertised. Already exceeded every expectation that I had for him this season. So having that's a good thing. Obviously, they need to stay healthy with the guys that they have, get Dorian Williams back in the near future to help offset the Matt Milano injury.
I'm very concerned about Dalton Concaid popping up on the injury report.
We'll bleed
And
too.
I'm just saying that because you almost have just the anxiety knowing what this kid has been through the last couple of years with injuries. And usually when one pops up, that tends to start a little bit of a trend for him over the years. Red non-contact jersey today. I saw what appeared to be a hand injury in the game. I asked Sean McDermott about it. He said he was just sore on Monday. Then it comes out today. He's in the red non-contact and listed on the injury report with an oblique injury. So now lower body, that to me is concerning for a guy that dealt with lower body injuries last season that completely took his season off the rails. And if you're talking about like level of importance to this offense, it's Josh Allen, it's James Cook, and Dalton Kincaid has risen to maybe just in line with James Cook because of how good he has been this year as a pass catcher. I saw a receiving chart that was going around on social media, I think it was today, where he was literally top 5 in some of the advanced analytics, combined with some wide receivers in the NFL, right? When it comes to being a pass catcher in 2025, the vision has been realized with Kincaid through 5 games, but now you see the injury and now you start to get a little bit of the anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say other than yeah. This is what happened last year, and you saw how a lower body injury hampered him. Obviously, completely different than what they have him listed as from last year to this year. But any kind of injury for him can be a setback. You know how important he is. He showed it against New England this past week. He's shown it all season long in terms of being open in the red zone, scoring touchdowns for this offense, getting open down the field on the pump fake, down the sideline. He is someone that is trusted by Josh Allen. He was finally really starting to look like that rookie version of himself again, catching a lot of big time passes and big moments, being counted upon in this system. And now that it pops up here, you do worry a little bit about Kincaid. And, you love what Jackson Hawes has brought, but that is not anywhere close to the same skill set. He is a blocker first, and then someone that can catch some passes later. And as much as Dawson, Knox, knows the system is trusted by Josh Allen, there is a drop off there in terms of the consistency in his game as a pass catcher.
Thank you so much for watching. If you're checking this out on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. We got a big weekend. I wanted to ask you too, what's your plans on Sunday? Are you planning on coming out to the Whitehall Tavern for BKL?
I don't know yet, because I will say my cousin and her husband, Rich, they bought tickets to the event. So I don't want to drag them out there too early. They're very pumped about that. Those two, my friend Holly from school growing up is out there now, and she's coming as well. So really excited to see a lot of people. But, we'll see. I know we have a speaker pickup at some point as well that we have
we got a lot going on
to
on
get
Sunday.
done. But yeah.
So what I was thinking is, because that event is sold out, one of the things I was going to say is maybe if you can get there for BKL, maybe we can just throw you on a segment of the show. I don't know, but like I'll ask Josh Reed about that.
Yeah.
But also I thought that would be a good way, because a lot of people are like, when's the party? And was like, oh, it's sold out. Like, can't get a ticket. Maybe that could be another opportunity to meet a bunch of Bills fans that are going to be in Atlanta. Just
Right.
something to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely something I'll consider. I'm pumped, though. This weekend's going to be a blast. Can't wait to get to Atlanta on Saturday night, spend time with Bills fans on Sunday, a big game on Monday night as well. It's going to be an awesome time.
So Anthony Prohaska, actually from Cover One, put out a chart that puts together receiving ratings in 3 categories: how much you get open, your ability to catch the ball, and then yards after the catch. And Concaid, his total score, combined score of 76, ranked 3rd in the NFL, behind only Puka Nacua and Stephon Diggs, which I thought was so like ironic, considering, like, in a lot of ways, when the Bills drafted Dalton Kincaid and they moved on from Diggs, it was a paradigm shift within the offense and within the
Right.
organization, almost like, all right, this is the heir apparent to who's supposed to lead this offense. Now, the issue is, from my perspective, watching this offense, is it doesn't necessarily revolve around Dalton Kincaid. Like, even last game when he gets 6 targets for 6 catches for 108 yards, it still felt like there was so much more out there to be able to get the ball to him. And that, to me, is something. I did a podcast with Jay Skursky this week from the Buffalo News. We had a great time, and we got a message, an email from a viewer. His name was Donald, and he sent all of this. It was like an article, Ryan. Like, it was all of his different takes about all the things we talked about on the podcast. And I want to read this off too, because I think it's really fitting. I still think most of the problem with the passing game is the scheme, not the receivers. Diggs was not a number 1 wide receiver his last year in Buffalo. The only way they can get him the ball was at or behind the line of scrimmage. Now with the Patriots, he's open all the time. Josh Palmer, was a good separator with the Chargers, but now he isn't with the Bills. I don't buy it. The Bills also seem to stereotype their receivers, such as Coleman is a contested catch guy, Moore and Samuel are gadget guys, Shakir is a slot guy. As a Syracuse alum, I still remember the 23 SU FSU game where Coleman was a human highlight reel, including punt returns. And I think Samuel may be the best receiver on the team, but the way they use him, we'll never know. I don't like the everybody eats philosophy. And he goes on to write a little bit more. To me, what he said there that I couldn't agree more with was how they stereotype their receivers. Like, once they put these guys in a box, it almost feels like they have to live in that box, and that's the only box that they get. I was told when they signed Curtis Samuel two off seasons ago that there wasn't anything he couldn't do in this offense. Like, down the field, separation, deep balls. We just haven't really seen that outside of the one game we did against one of the best defenses in football, the Denver Broncos, when he had that big long touchdown. Maybe do that more, Ryan. Like, I don't know why they are so committed to keeping these guys and maybe it is the experience with Diggs late, however that transpired, that pushed Brady, how he viewed the Ken Dorsey downfall and how he pivoted off of that offense and into the season that was beyond Stephon Diggs. I think all of that kind of is at play here together.
And that's fair. I would love to see Keon Coleman get some more slot reps. A lot of the draft analysts had him as a big slot, someone that could do a lot of damage that way. I don't feel like we see that enough. And I get it. You have certain guys that have been very successful in that role, but you got to be able to move these guys around, make them interchangeable. Like, for many years, we talked about the safeties being interchangeable on this team. Why can't you do that at wide receiver? Why can't you move these guys around and utilize their skill sets? I think there's still a lot they can do with Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel. I don't think you necessarily have to just play Khalil Shakir a certain way, despite the success that he's had. So, yes, there is something that needs to be said, or some tweaks that need to be made, because, Joshua Palmer is making $13 million and he is not being utilized as such. Chart came out. He was listed in the quadrant of having a great average separation score. It was closer to the middle than it was far to the right, but it was still in that quadrant of he can separate. Maybe they're just not utilizing him the right way or enough, or giving him enough looks or opportunities. So the Bills might have to go back to the drawing board as soon as this bye week coming up after the Atlanta week and say, What can we do to put these guys in better situations to utilize what they do best?
One of the topics that came up today, talking to Keon and then Josh Palmer, was this is a team that knows how good they are when they run the ball, right? And when the
Right.
run game is going, as it has been over the last 3 games heading into the Patriots game, it's almost like if you're a receiver, if you're the quarterback, it's like you're almost sitting on your hands like, we're doing this so well, right? Like this is something that like we're not going to push back when you're winning games like this. I think in a lot of ways, Keon talked about this in the offseason when he came back from injury and they had established this identity. It wasn't going to be pushed back on that. And so I asked Josh Palmer today, I was like, is that frustrating at times? Is it hard to be patient and wait for these opportunities when they're so few and far between? And let's listen to his answer and then we'll discuss it.
Got to take advantage of it.
Yes and no. You know, if we're beating the team and the run game is working, then we just have to do our part as receivers and help Jimbo and the running backs and the O-line block. If it's a throwing game that turns into that like the Ravens did, then we do our parts and make plays on the field. You never really know how the game is going to go. Of course, we come with a plan, but once that plan kind of blows up, it's just how to react. And, you know, I think we're very good. Josh is very good at reacting, and I don't think we flinch as an offense.
So I think that's the right mentality to have. I almost think it's the one that you have, but it's also I think frustration of being so good at one thing or two things. And then when you're leaning on one of those things, knowing when to pivot to the other, like they really had to pivot in the second half last week. And it was like we talked about early in the show, it was too little too late.
Yeah. And, you know, maybe
you have to talk about Palmer's ass, by the way.
Well, I avoided. I said average separation score, but yeah, I love that chart. Come on, great
But
ass.
No, you did not try to avoid it because you tweeted.
Oh yeah, I
Please
tweeted
read
it.
your exact tweet,
show.
please.
Yes, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the chart because great ass and badass is a fantastic way to break down wide receivers and tight ends. Ironically enough, in this league in terms of how they get open. So, you know, I did enjoy that quite a bit, but you know, I feel like the Bills need to come in here and be more balanced. It shouldn't just, as you said earlier, shouldn't just be like, let's lean on the run game and things like that. You need to get these wide receivers more involved because we've talked about Ray Davis and how hard it is for a running back to get going if you're only getting a few opportunities. It's got to be the same way for these wide receivers. If you're Joshua Palmer and you're getting 3 targets one week and maybe some, you know, a lot more in week 1 and not being utilized, it's difficult no matter the position. You got to be able to get them their opportunities and see what they can do with the ball in their hands.
Oh man, we're gonna have a ton of opportunities to talk about the Bills over the next what do we got here? 72 hours before we get to the big Monday night game. So much coming your way this weekend. Ryan and I will be on the road. If you want us, I figure I'm not going to say we're going to vlog our journey, but we'll definitely take insiders on the trip with us. We get 1 or 2 times a year where Ryan and I get to bro up, travel together, and do the whole road game experience. So if you want to join us for the trip to Atlanta and you can't make it there, 716-528-6727. Great time to become a Shout Bills insider. We got the live show coming up this weekend in Atlanta, and get it on your calendars now. The night before the Kansas City Chiefs game, we are back at Wingnuts, 1402 Millersport Highway. It's going to be the biggest live show of the year. It always is. Our friends from Nova Scotia, I believe, are going to check in before they go to the Sabres game. And if you're going to the Sabres game, I know it's not ideal timing, but come on out, hang out until you have to go. It's going to be a great time the night before the Chiefs game.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see our friends from Nova Scotia again and all the Bills Mafia. You guys showed up in a big time way. Go Sabres. This is the year that they break the drought, by the way. They're going to the playoffs this year. Calling it now.
Wow. I'm going to clip that out, save that for 4 months from now, and we'll go from there. All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Big weekend to come. Take care, everybody.